Hello and welcome. We're so happy to have you here. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Normally, there would be three of us here, Marlena, myself, and Aaron, all around the virtual roundtable discussing a topic that pertains to adulting with ADHD. However, we have some exciting news to share and also a little bit of history to give you about where Attention Different comes from, the brand name, the company, the organization, this group of people. It all kind of started with this TEDx talk that I gave many moons ago, about a decade ago, when I was a senior in undergrad in college. And recently, this video has resurfaced on Instagram and TikTok, which gets Aaron and Marlena and Benj and I really excited. I have been putting off rewatching this video and talking about it and updating it for a number of years, and Aaron can attest to this. So here we are a decade later, and we figured we should do a reaction video. So today we're going to talk about the TEDx talk, where it came from, how I got to the TEDx stage, the reception of the video, and in all transparency, things I wish I could go back in time and change about that successful talk.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see how now this is trending on social media again after so many years. 2015 was when I met you.
I gave the talk in 2013, graduated college, and then was living in New York and saw that Chad was in New Orleans, which is where I was born.
I mean, you have over 2 million views. I think it's almost at 3 million at this point.
Yeah.
But why it's coming up now in the social context, that's what's kind of interesting to me. I think it partially has to do with the neurodiversity movement and acceptance, and how coming out of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of people talking about ADHD on TikTok, on Instagram, a lot of content creators. And one of the videos I saw where people are reacting to this is kind of you addressing the misconceptions around ADHD and how that's resonating with people.
The part of me that's nervous and has been holding on to a bit of small s shame, if not small g guilt, for years about that talk is, as Aaron pointed out, it wasn't more than a year after giving that talk that it jumped from about 1,500 views to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands actually, within a calendar year. Part of me feels that this video has resurfaced exactly for the reasons Aaron pointed out, the neurodivergence spike through COVID. A lot of people trapped inside, quarantined, a lot of self-reflection, and suddenly a bunch of like positive screenings for a whole myriad, a whole bag of complex mental conditions that have surfaced since COVID quarantine. The other reason I wonder about, and it's one of the reasons that I get contacted a lot from people who liked the video, not across the board, but a healthy amount of people who reach out because of the sticky, icky topic that we're going to get to later in this video, which is the ending of the video, in which I made a sort of Joan of Arc series of demands and claims about medication and medicating children and young people with ADHD. Is there an alchemy of reasons this video resurfaced? Is it because of wider awareness and acceptance of neurodiversity and complex mental health? Is it also because there's rhetoric in that is anti-medication? And I don't know about you, Aaron, but I've seen a number of videos pop up, of content pop up on Instagram and TikTok disparaging stimulant medication and advertising alternatives to medication, and my video doesn't not say that at the end.
But that was a problematic piece of it. I don't think that's not what I think has been trending the most, though. The way you frame ADHD as a strength, not a deficit, and how you firmly positioned ADHD as this attribute that's part of you that makes you a creative, dynamic person. I think that's what really I'm seeing people resonate with.
I want to talk about where the talk came from and how it came to be in general, and I love telling the story, actually. Full disclosure. Still a very good friend and best friend of mine, and girlfriend on and off for the 4 years I was an undergrad, was also ADHD, right? And the two of us come from very different cultural backgrounds. I was born and raised in the South, Louisiana and Texas, and she was born and raised in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Below the Mason-Dixon line, above the Mason-Dixon line, Northeast culture versus Southern culture, there is a different approach to self-education, self-actualization, medicine, therapy, I run the gamut. My ex believed very firmly in the importance of presenting yourself, particularly as we're coming close to graduating college and going on a job search. In her wildest dreams, she would never consider admitting that she has ADHD in an interview. And we got into these arguments about this constantly over the 4 years at undergrad, where I had had a different upbringing and experience with ADHD. It was something that was me. I had never used the rhetoric, I have ADHD. I had always used the rhetoric, I am ADHD. It was my brain wiring. It required very little logic on my part personally. I thought, okay, it's my brain. My brain is me. I am ADHD.
And you weren't ashamed of it.
Wasn't ashamed of it. And I have to give credit where it's due. God bless my mother. Wonderful, wonderful, positive framing of this condition from the very beginning. Finally, by senior year, I was feeling myself. I was co-president of the film club. I'd been selected to give our graduation commencement address to the School of Drama. I was flying high. And I saw a TEDx student speaker competition sign-up table. It just so happens that I had literally just had the same argument routine with my ex that day or the day before. Like I had just gotten into this classic argument of I am versus I have. I see the table and I think to myself, probably out loud to my friend next to me walking, you know what? I'm not just going to argue with her one-on-one. I'm going to argue my case in front of 500 people. I worked a very long time with a guy, actually, I want to give some credit to. His name was Arden. He was a grad student. There were versions of the speech that were very heavily statistics-based, right? Data-based, data-heavy. And it was actually Arden who really elevated this idea, this philosophy, like shared this philosophy with me that allegory and anecdote are stronger. I could have gone out there and spouted off a bunch of online research that I'd found or in the library, if you can believe it, back in that day, on ADHD. But it was through Arden and a group of assistants for this process that I came to really appreciate and understand that what is interesting is my version of ADHD, right? My version of the experience, my journey, rather than like relevant facts we can all Google. I gave the speech. It went over quite well. And without being too cliche, as an ADHDer, I graduated and forgot about it. I gave the talk, I graduated, and I moved to New York. And within that calendar year,
Your interests shift.
My interests shift. I started a documentary with a friend from undergrad. And like I said, I think in an intro with Aaron, I didn't realize its virality until my mother called me while I was living in Sacramento at the time on this doc and said, have you watched your YouTube video? 7 or so months had passed, and I go and look, and I think that first time she called, it was at like the 200,000 to 400,000 range. And that was a huge jump. That was a stark contrast from what I had seen before. So from that moment on, it was really a journey of tracking it going viral, just exploding. That first 2 years, 200,000 to 500 to 750,000 to 1 million to 1.2 million. And around that 1 million, 2 million mark, it started, the calls started coming, if you will, like started receiving emails, started getting comments, people started reaching out. It started garnering like Twitter responses, like that. And to be entirely frank, there was one Twitter response in particular that was negative. And this person was very much an adult, former journalist, and she tore it. She just like tore it apart. It was like, no. And I remember the line, soft-headed platitudes delivered to a confirmation biased audience does not an expert make. was her review of my TEDx talk. I don't know if I'd already decided to go to Chad that year, but like I said, the calls were coming because of the virality. So people were nudging me to go to Chad. And at this point, I was now very afraid to go because I thought there were more of her, rather than fewer. I thought maybe there were going to be other speakers and lecturers there who were going to like just hate on me if I show up. And to be frank, to be honest, I didn't want any of that. I wasn't interested in going to this like conference of my peers only to have to discover that like they all hate me.
Yeah.
Day one, I walk into the conference. It's my first chat conference, 2014, and holding my mother's hand. And I noticed two things. Number one, I am being recognized. It wasn't like every single person, but like because the video was pretty hot at that point, people were watching me and like could see who I was. And they were like, oh, that's the kid. And that happened enough times without like anger on people's faces where I started to like loosen up. But I was like, oh, like people are like nodding and waving and like pointing, that's the guy who just did the TEDx talk. And
yeah, you went from being an ADHD to being this public figure in the ADHD community, like a creator, an influencer of sorts.
At that time, there weren't TEDx talks. There weren't ADHD TEDx talks. That wasn't, I was about 5 years to a decade ahead of like the avalanche of people talking on TEDx or any kind of public forum about ADHD. And especially about like a neurodivergent take, like a am versus have, like that was a very progressive idea still.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
Right.
No one else was talking about that.
It was that first night that I met Aaron. I had started to get comfortable with meeting people, and now I'm confirming it because people are meeting me and they're like, Stephen Tonti, you gave the TEDx talk, and that was happening. And my mother and I were witness to actually largely positive response. In fact, it was Aaron and Jessica. You were some of the first people who gave me my hybrid response, right? So most people were very positive. It was you and Jessica and some others who were like, loved your talk until the last 2 minutes. Like it was like this really like, no, I love that you said this. I totally relate to this. This was awesome. And then you mucked it up in the last 2 minutes and we would all have a laugh about it. And even then I think I remember being like quite humble, like, yeah, I know I that felt, I looking back on it, that feels weird. Like, because we'll get to the video, but I essentially get to this point where I'm like 16-year-olds should not be on medication. And that was so laughably incorrect. But everything leading up to that was very positive reframing, very neurodivergent forward. And
yeah.
And that was my experience sharing it with people.
I remember watching your talk before that conference, not knowing you. And I was in my own journey of starting my company right around 2015. I was launching myself as an ADHD coach. I was a clinician, therapist, but I was moving into being an ADHD expert, being someone who was building a business around this stuff. And I remember I was in this deep dive of, I'm going to look up every single thing I can about ADHD and, who are the key players and who are the people, the gatekeepers and all of the people we need to know, right? And so I'm just doing this huge hyper focus as we do, like just I'm going to search whatever's out there and I'm going to get the pulse of ADHD in this moment.
You Alice in Wonderland it. You went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And I remember your video struck a chord with me. I stumbled across it and I was just like, whoa, that was powerful. What I loved about it and about you and your energy right from the beginning was that you had this confidence and this embrace and this acceptance of ADHD in a way that just made me feel good as a person. It made me feel seen and heard. It was one of the things that I remember being like, man, attention different. That's amazing. Like that framing, attention different. I almost wanted to call my company that. What I want to do is, because your talk has come up again, let's like have some real takes on what we think about it right now about this.
Are you asking me to take a trip in the way back machine?
Yes.
Take a little drive.
I'm down. We meant to do this for a while now, and karma and the cosmos has knocked on the door and told us it's time. In essence. It has been a minute since I have watched this straight through, to be frank. So let's add another view onto that view count.
Cool. Okay. Hi. My name is Stephen Tonti, and I'm a director, and a writer, an actor, a drummer, scuba diver, soccer player, a camera operator, an airbrush artist, a physicist, a stargazer, a rock climber, a snowboarder, a model maker, a stage manager, a camp counselor, a PA, a DJ, a club president, a magician, and for a brief stint in May of 2012, I was called upon to repair 2 stopwatches which had stopped working. Who am I,
Random
you
facts.
ask? My name is Stephen Tonti, and I have ADHD.
Ooh, I have ADHD.
Have it. Yeah.
ADHD
Have.
stands for Attention
was
Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And I was first
Hyperactivity.
Okay, so 2 things. I mislabeled myself, and I gave my ex the win right there at the beginning. I said I have rather than I am. I gave the W away. But the other thing that Aaron was pointing out is it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I said hyperactive, and I also mispronounced it at the time because the correct pronunciation is ADHD as opposed to ADHD. There's a slash in between ADHD.
I was first diagnosed with ADHD not by a diagnostician or a private practice or a pediatrician, but by a 2nd grade teacher who was interviewing me for a spot at the school she was working at. Now, you see, my family had just moved from New Orleans, Louisiana to Dallas, Texas, and I was in a search for a new academic home. Now, during this particular interview, this particular teacher received a message ahead of time from my 1st grade teacher back in New Orleans to check me for any signs of ADHD. And just as she reached the series of questions devised to evaluate whether a child between the ages of 5 and 17
Look at
is
that
ADHD,
mustache.
wham! I fell out of my
Great
chair.
stash going on.
Also,
No.
all true.
I didn't slip.
I
And
did
no,
fall
the chair
out of
didn't
the chair.
crumble beneath me. You see, behind the teacher's desk was this giant window.
I love this
And
part.
through that window was a giant
My mom told me this.
and
I didn't
on
know
that
this was it, but
field
she tracked
were
the
what
beach ball.
appeared to me at the time to be hundreds of thousands of kids. And they were all playing with a great, big, inflatable rainbow beach ball.
Really important detail.
And as they
Rainbow.
played and moved all around the field, it was all I could do to keep track of them. So I leaned a little bit to the left, and I leaned a little bit to the right, and I leaned a little
Disaster.
bit more to the left, and a little bit more to the right before disaster. I still maintain today that window was a trap
It
that I
was
set up.
100%.
So I was rejected from middle school because I was an 8-year-old boy who couldn't sit still in his chair. Oh, and there was this complex marshmallow-related incident between myself and some of the staff there. But anyway,
Yeah.
I ended up at the Episcopal School of Dallas, and over the next 11 years, I tried everything. And when I say everything, I mean
Everything.
Extracurriculars. I tried computing, robotics, carpentry, canoeing,
Facts.
rock climbing, poetry club, logic
Facts.
club, poker club, comedy club, and
Facts.
camping. I went camping at least twice a year for 4 years, and band.
I love
Oh
band.
my God. I tried the trumpet, the saxophone, the piano, the electric bass, the
So many
stand-up bass,
instruments.
the guitar, both acoustic. And did I mention I
I
played
did.
sports? It was Texas.
Yeah.
We played sports. I tried all of them. And the drums. And I even took
Every
a short-lived stab at
ADHDer.
the harp. I played 7 different instruments.
Played being a very generous term. I learned to read music in none of them. but I,
Right,
but I
right.
Also, yeah, I learned
I
to read
played
music.
them all to a certain level, and then
Yeah,
I was like, "That's not fun anymore. I'm not great at this. Let's move on to the next one. Maybe I'll be the best at that instrument now."
Give credit where it's due, right? Really positive spin, you know? I
Yeah.
really am nailing in the positive spin on ADHD and leaving out all of the parts that drove my parents effing crazy. The fact that it's hey, I'm an airbrush artist this week. Hey, I'm a scuba diver this week. Hey, I'm going to play soccer this week. Hey, you know what? I think actually lacrosse is my thing. This opener, this first 3 minutes is the section where the bulk of fellow ADHDers relate to it. All the comments I get, emails, messages, it's oh my God, me too. I've had not 3 different careers. I've had 20, you know?
Yeah.
The multifaceted side of ADHDers feels fairly unified, right? Carry on.
When all of a sudden my school built a theater, and I thought, why not? So I started in the shop building sets, and then I moved to the sound booth, and then the light booth, and then my teacher asked me to act, so I played Conrad in Ordinary People. And then I said, can I direct? And she said, go for it. So I directed 12 Angry Jurors, because this is high school, people, and you can't direct 12 Angry Men with a drama school that has 3 boys and 4 girls. Yes, for the people doing the math at home, that's 7 drama students for a show with a 12 in it.
Yeah.
So
hilarious.
I was auditioning and interviewing at drama schools across the country. And that's when Carnegie Mellon found me. And I love it here. I really do. But moving on.
Yeah.
So what? So I have ADHD.
Back on that Carnegie thing
and
later.
ADHD is misunderstood as an inability to focus.
Yeah.
But it's much stranger than that. It's not a lack of
Ooh,
focus,
I like that.
period. It's that I have a hard time selecting something and giving it my full attention.
That's important.
Something has to grab
really
my
important.
attention, pique my curiosity, and then I can hyper-focus.
Yeah, I like that they used the word strange. That was a good choice.
And that you have this selective attention, right?
Yeah.
And because it's not this inability to focus. That is so key. That's the part of what's misunderstood, and even what's problematic about the label, right?
Yeah.
Attention different versus attention deficit. It's not a deficit in attention. It's an inconsistency. And I love the fact that you kind of like brought that up right here. It comes down to self-regulation and a regulation issue of attention.
Yeah.
And it's contextual. And I love how you brought that up. Like, here you are in a drama school surrounded by creative folks and doing really interesting creative things. And in those contexts, when it's new, when it's stimulating, when there's things that are shiny, then our attention just like clicks in.
It's a bad thing because I have a hard time completing things that don't excite me. And we live in a world where you have to read your textbooks
Still
and
remains
pay your
true
taxes.
to this day.
Yeah.
And yes,
Yeah.
big textbooks with no pictures frighten
It's
me.
true. Still true.
And no one likes handling taxes. Well,
That's
actually,
true for me too.
like that. But the upside is, when something does pique my curiosity, I become obsessed and I hyper-focus. I spend a lot of time with film. I can spend upwards of 12 hours in a row editing clips, sometimes until 6:30 in the morning. In the theater, when I have to put a show up, I'll pull
Hyper-focus.
15-hour days for weeks on end.
That
and I
changed.
enjoy that.
That changed. I no longer enjoy 16-hour days.
I can read a 500-page novel that I love much faster than a one-page article I don't care for. It's easier for me to see the big picture. As a director, I have to track 20 people with very different jobs, from designers to writers to actors, and I find handling that much easier than finishing that one-page article.
Highlighting the advantages of ADHD.
Yeah.
David Neilman, the founder and CEO of JetBlue, who is also ADHD, mind you, says, I have a hard time doing the mundane things in life. I have an easier time planning a 20-aircraft fleet than I do paying my light bill.
Classic.
I remember this. That sounds like a flexy point, and the point is hilariously like not. It's almost strong enough to like drop a bomb, a mic on that quote. But actually, what's happening there is I forgot my next line. 100% forgot the next line of this speech, and like as like a performer's practice, right? You don't show it, and you keep moving through it, but it comes off like this. Yeah, that David Neilman quote, right? Right.
So, another good thing about ADHD.
There it is. I got the line.
Because I felt compelled to try everything, I was able to explore all the possible career paths I might not have and might not have discovered what I truly want to do. So many teens and young adults are expected to focus on 1 or 2 fields of study and 1 or 2 hobbies and hope and pray they like the ones they've chosen or that have been chosen for them.
I remember saying
My
that.
job is to tell other people's stories, and I find an easier time doing that when I can draw from all of
This
these
is
other
so true right now.
perspectives.
Like, because I
It's
ended up being a
easier for me to
producer.
see the world
Yeah,
through the
that's
eyes
what
of
I'm
a
saying
drummer
right now.
because I've tried that. It's easier for me to see the world through the eyes of a graphic designer because I've tried that too.
I was a graphic designer too.
ADHD is
Yeah.
a difference in cognition, not simply a disorder.
Oh, it's a difference in cognition. There it is.
We are
There it is.
attention,
Attention different.
Woo!
Yes.
Attention difference, not
Because
deficit.
it is treated and misunderstood as a disorder, it's treated as something that needs fixing.
All of these are connected in
So the idea
cadence.
seems to be that we need to get rid of my ADHD. But there's no getting rid of it. There's just sedating it.
The
I was
first
lucky.
sticky.
My high school teachers were hip, young progressives who were delighted to give me extra time, the additional attention, and the overall freedom to express myself the way that I felt necessary. So many other kids with ADHD aren't as lucky. For example, my roommate. Adam has been my roommate for 4 years. He is an excellent actor in the School of Drama and a brilliant thinker. We both grew up in Dallas, Texas, and we both have ADHD. Adam's high school was different. Now, even though he grew up only 15 minutes north of me, Adam's high school had harsher penalties for falling out of your chair. Now, you see, when you're a kid diagnosed with ADHD, your doctor administers a series of amphetamines, and everybody waits, because no one has a clue how you'll react. You might get more calm. You might become depressed. You might lash out at the people around you. Now, the difference between Adam and me is when a new medication may cause me to act out, my teachers immediately advise my doctors that I change my medication. However, when Adam tried a new medication, his teachers wrote this in his report. Adam is less motivated, less animated, and less involved in class activities, but at least he's quiet now.
This I still stand by. This was absolutely the State of the Union in Dallas, Texas. It was institution by institution, doctor by doctor. Adam, still a best friend of mine to this day, sent me the report card, like with the highlighted sentence where it said, at least he's quiet now. And even Adam's parents at the time, who were struggling with stimulant medications, which ones to give him, and they're having to do the medication monitoring themselves because there's no formal practice of that either in his school or like, you feel me? There was no one else was doing it. So they're struggling to figure out which medications are working for Adam or not. And the real downer here, the real bummer, is that there's years later, we know a non-zero chance that Adam has co-occurring conditions that actually make the medication process way more complicated. And they weren't working. They were having a really adverse effect on him as a teenager.
Yeah, and it's hard to know some of that sometimes as a teen, especially if it's like bipolar or some other condition. It usually starts manifesting later in the teens and even in the 20s.
At the end of this speech, I will make a sort of rousing demand about medication and medicating students and kids. That demand comes from this place in the talk, right? My experience with Adam and my experience with the chaos in Dallas, Texas at the time of knowledge and of information on how to diagnose, prescribe, medication monitor, the difference between non-stimulants and stimulants. That was the wild, wild west still at that time.
And pediatricians versus a child adolescent psychiatrist.
Yes.
There's not enough education about ADHD, complex mental health. So that's why, not to say psychiatry, they have their own faults and their own, areas that could be improved, but at least an adolescent psychiatrist has more experience and usually more training to be able to differentiate and give the right kind of medication and really take the time. A general practice doctor doesn't have the time or expertise to do that.
We need a healthier understanding of people with ADHD, and it starts at home. I had a mother and a father who supported.
This is a great moment from my dad.
I distinctly recall my father asking one day, "Son, you're only 14. What could you possibly want with an air compressor?" To which I responded, "I want to airbrush t-shirts and shorts and sell them to my classmates and friends."
I did that too.
Yeah.
In high school.
All right then. And he would go out and he would get it, and I would play with it, and I would obsess over it. During the summers when I went off my medication and my body was wrecked with the effects of withdrawal, my mother sat by my side, literally coaxing the migraines out of me. With their support, I was able to explore, and my obsessions grew and multiplied, and I was able to maintain my sanity.
Yeah.
Schools need to develop a better attitude towards students with ADHD as well, and there are plenty of examples out there.
This is relevant for all parents, regardless of how much money you have or privilege. Follow your kids' interests. Listen to them. Pay attention. If they're saying, "Hey, I'm interested in this thing," don't force them into a box of, "Well, no, this is what I think you should be interested in." Kind of how my mom did, right? It's like, no, give them the opportunities to explore and to create and to find all of those passion projects and those talents that they have within that are there. And arguably ADHDers, we have a greater need for that stuff.
They balanced, on average, pretty well the two competing plates of encouraging curiosity, but also their version of warning on the flip side was always geared towards spreading yourself too thin. It was not like, that's dumb that you're interested in that, right? It was never shaming, like, that's a stupid thing to be interested in, or why would you be interested in that, blah, 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 right? That, more and deeper conversations on parent to parent, how that was nuanced, but later. But in general, the warnings were more kind of mature and adult warnings, right? They were like, hey, it's really great that you have all these interests, but it's going to be really hard to manage this many interests. Most people boil it down to 1, 2, 3 of them.
You can't do it all, Stephen.
You can't do it all, Stephen. Like, you will have to boil it down.
The Eagle Hill School in Hardwick, Massachusetts. The Eagle Hill School believes that every student can learn, that learning differently requires teaching differently, and that we must educate our kids, our students, to learn about learning in order to form new beliefs in a search for intellectual autonomy.
Yeah, Eagle Hill nailed it.
Professors who act more as mentors as opposed to disciplinarians inspire me.
Yes.
When
Still to
teachers
this day.
level with me, I feel like I'm more in control.
Yes.
That there's a dialogue regarding new ways of thinking and approaching a problem, focusing, completing tasks.
Yes.
This is all really good.
We have to create and develop a healthier relationship with medication.
Here we go.
I think that Ritalin, Adderall, Concerta should only be prescribed to someone who can physically handle the effects of these drugs and their withdrawal. 12 is far too young.
No!
16 is still too young. There are so many alternatives to medication. Studies have shown that for some, it's just an added weight or pressure to help them focus. And
This
these
stuff is
things
good.
exist. There are waiting
These are the
paths that help
alternatives.
people
This
feel
was
more
good. The
comfortable
intention
so
is
they
good
can
here.
complete tasks on time. For some people, it's tics like chewing pencils. So give them rubber-coated pencils.
Yeah, okay, so the cat's out of the bag, the elephant's in the room. I've now seen this copy pasted on a number of other organizations that talk about ADHD. Aaron and I run into people who talk about ADHD as a superpower. A lot of like overly positive rhetoric surrounding ADHD often comes along with a disparaging of medication or using stimulant medication, this, that, and the third. So this is not even abnormal. It's pretty cliche, actually, for me to go from like positive reframing of ADHD and then like very easily slide into, we need to medicate our kids less. And the problem with that is literally everything I learned after giving this talk. Literally everything I learned, every lecture I went to, every CHAD circuit I went to, all the work I did with Aaron. The misstep here, and Aaron will back me up, sure of it, is that right out of the gate, the first thing that's okay to say is we have to develop a healthier relationship with medication. I still believe that. It's the second sentence when I go into 12 is far too young. That's gut wrenching to me now, 10 years later, because I know how improper that is.
In terms of even kids, let's just hit this right where we need to. Your whole thing was like, what you said in the speech is like 12 is far too young. And
because I said physically handle.
Yeah, it plays into the fear of, are we over medicating our kids? Are these strong psychoactive medications that we're drugging our kids? And I think the fear is way overblown, that there creates a lot of stigma around medication. And actually, what I have seen in practice is that these medications, stimulant medications, are widely safe, and they actually are kind of like putting on glasses, seeing the clouds part, and finally they can focus. Finally, their brain calms down a little bit more.
Yeah.
Parents don't want to start with giving their kids medication, but actually, because of how safe the medications are and because they're 80% effective to helping children with ADHD, it's actually a very good first line course of treatment, along with all of the other great things you mentioned. It's like if they can start with medication and build in conjunction with medication behavioral strategies and parental strategies and other things of understanding ADHD, then the child doesn't develop a sense of poor self-esteem. They don't experience as many failures in life. So there's a lot of actual benefits of starting earlier, even earlier than 12. So that's the big correction on the record is, I still think 5 is too young. 4 is too
Right.
young. There's people
Right.
that advocate for preschoolers getting candy flavored medication. You could switch this if you redo this and talk about how maybe the age of medicating preschoolers or something is too young. But 8 years old, 7, 8 years old is usually the time when kids do get prescribed medicine and diagnosed with ADHD. That's kind of the average age. And I don't think that that's too young. I think that that is actually appropriate, that it helps in development and it helps them to not have some of the side effects of improper treatment of ADHD. And that's the more scary thing, is when we don't treat it properly.
Yeah, I'm gonna do something really tactical and carefully here. Okay, I'm gonna preface what I'm about to say by saying that everything Aaron just said, I agree with. I have come to agree with. I have learned. I have dramatically changed my opinion from this moment 10 years ago. This moment is brought to you by anger that I had and frustration that I had with the system of medical oversight, if you will, in Dallas, Texas, when I was 10 and 11 and 12. I had not adverse reactions to the medication. I did not have adverse reactions to the medication. What I know now is that I had adverse reactions to the lifestyle around the medication, right? I was having migraines at the beginning of summer, end of the school year, and the first 2 weeks of the school starting, because I would go off of Ritalin, right, for the summer. And the mistake I made, right, is that, oh, the Ritalin is causing migraines. I'm experiencing withdrawal. To break that down to its science for a moment, what's going on in a 10-year-old with ADHDer's life is that, guess what? My diet was not very regular if I wasn't in school, right, where you eat at a strict time. Drinking enough water in Dallas, Texas, a very hot place, right, that gets to 106, 108 degrees during the summer, okay? There were many factors involved in the series of migraines that I would get during the 2 weeks I would switch off of Ritalin and start my summer, and the 2 weeks I would get on Ritalin and start the school year, right? There are multiple mitigating factors, and neither my parents nor my GP, right, nor my pediatrician, nor me at 10, 11, and 12 had the knowledge, the experience, the know-how to avoid those things with other common practices, right, around medication. The approach was what the problem was, right? It was not the medication that was the problem. It was our collective approach to medicating me at that age was problematic, if that makes sense. So if I could go back and change this, I would probably underscore more confidently this sort of, we need to collectively change our approach to medicating kids, not we need to stop medicating kids, which is what this came off of.
We have to teach kids to teach themselves. It's the best thing that we can do for our kids. And lastly, our society has to embrace cognitive diversity.
Yeah.
For example, Special Eastern, or The Specialists, is a
This is
Danish
my
organization
research
that
at the time.
trains people with autism and ADHD as consultants in IT and other more technically
I connected with
oriented
Special Eastern
tasks and
after this. We
jobs.
talked about this.
We have to turn this joke around on those who believe that my disorder divides me from my more normal peers. Besides, who here at Carnegie Mellon really qualifies as normal anyway?
So true. So true. That place is full of a bunch of freaks and nerds. It's my favorite.
A great author, a masterful playwright, and a sublime poet once writ. Any guesses as to who I speak of? Shakespeare. Thou art correct. Shakespeare's Sonnet 121. 'Tis better to be vile than vile esteemed, when not to be receives reproach of being, and the just pleasure lost, which is so deemed not by our feelings, but by others' seeing. For why should others' false adulterate eyes give salutation to my sportive blood? Or, on my frailties, why are frailer spies, which in their wills count bad what I think good? Nay, I am that I am. They that level at my abuses reckon up their own. I may be straight, though they themselves be bevel. By their rank thoughts, my deeds must not be shown, unless this general evil they all maintain. All men are bad, and in their badness reign. In Sonnet 121,
that's the beginning of the
Shakespeare
double
condemns
ending.
hypocrisy. He implores us not to let others' false adulterate eyes condemn us for something they believe us to be.
Yeah.
He begs you not to let the selfish and negative comments of others hinder the just pleasures owed to you.
Yeah.
A hierarchy of frailer spies have asked me to conform to society's means. And I propose the opposite.
Yeah.
I propose let society conform to me. And
Yeah.
I implore you to do the same.
Mic drop.
I'll leave you with something that Robin Williams, a poster child for us in the ADHD community,
And a hero.
once said. We are all only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it. Thank you.
Standing
it's,
O.
it's like making me tear up. Just oh man,
Yeah.
that Robin
aw.
Williams quote always.
Right? Oh, actually, so here's what we're gonna do, like, to start this off, actually, because I love that first of all, I'm so grateful that we're doing this. I'm so grateful that Aaron's getting emotional right now. I so rarely get to see this like strong, stolid individual, this man, like is feeling feelings. I love that. That the Robin Williams quote did that, right?
Let's not extinguish this spark, this brilliance. Let's not put that out. That's not something to be like to hide away from or to shy away from. That is actually the life force, the thing that
Yes.
is beautiful about the person and the individual.
Yes.
And if we can cherish that and see that and recognize that, it's not to say that everything about every condition, every complex mental health condition is positive or great. But it's to say that if we value the human being and see the individual as a person, as someone that has all of these attributes, and look at their qualities and their beauty in context, then instead of judging them, instead of passing judgment first,
Yeah.
let's embrace them. Let's accept them. That's what Attention Different is all about.
When we go to Chad and we hang out like last November at a table full of 20 ADHDers, you stop being hypervigilant and you can feel it. Like I could feel it that first Chad, and I was so excited to go back last November, even after a huge gap and COVID and everything, because when you sit at that table and everyone is ADHD, everyone lets go of their hypervigilant cover your ass syndrome by like, we're no longer curtailing our behavior. We're letting circle talk happening. We're letting like leads get buried. We're just jumping from subject to subject. We're moving around the space, which happened to be my father's house for an after party. And we're
I'm late.
Yeah.
Oh, you too? Yeah. Oh, where's the thing? Oh, I don't know. Do you have the schedule?
and no one's
people
judging.
don't judge you. Yeah.
No, in fact, we're
accept
doing the thing that my mother taught me to do when she told me at 12 years old, you have an inner monologue. It's going to talk at you. The greatest thing you can do, Stephen, is to become friends with that inner monologue.